Sarah Martinez stepped off the military transport truck, her boots hitting the dusty ground of Fort Braxton Training Facility. The North Carolina heat was already making her uniform stick to her back, even though it was barely 8 in the morning. She grabbed her duffel bag and looked around at the other recruits gathering in the courtyard. Most of them were men, tall and broad-shouldered, talking loudly about their high school football achievements and hunting trips. At 22, Sarah wasn't the youngest recruit, but she was certainly one of the smallest. Standing at 5 feet 4 inches, she had to crane her neck to make eye contact with most of her fellow trainees. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes took in everything around her with quiet observation. She had grown up on a small ranch in Texas, where her father had taught her to shoot tin cans off fence posts when she was barely tall enough to hold a rifle properly. The other recruits barely glanced at her as they formed groups, sharing stories and making quick friendships. Sarah had always been more comfortable listening than talking, so she stood quietly with her bag, waiting for instructions. She could hear snippets of conversation around her, boasts about shooting deer at 300 yards, claims about being the best marksman in their hometown, and jokes about boot camp being easy compared to their civilian jobs. Drill Sergeant Williams appeared seemingly out of nowhere, his voice booming across the courtyard like thunder. He was a mountain of a man, with arms that looked like they could bend steel bars and a face that seemed carved from granite. His uniform was perfectly pressed and his boots shined like mirrors. Every recruit immediately snapped to attention, some more successfully than others. "Welcome to Fort Braxton, maggots," he bellowed. "For the next 16 weeks, this place is going to be your home, your school, and your worst nightmare all rolled into one. Some of you think you're tough because you played varsity sports or worked construction. Let me tell you something. None of that matters here. We're going to break you down and build you back up into something resembling a soldier." Sarah listened intently as Sergeant Williams continued his speech, outlining the basic rules and expectations. She noticed how some of the larger recruits seemed to puff up with confidence while others looked nervous. She felt neither confident nor nervous, just focused. This was what she had come here to do, and she was ready to put in the work. The sergeant began calling names from his clipboard, assigning recruits to their barracks. When he called Martinez Sarah, a few of the male recruits turned to look at her with surprise. One of them, a tall blonde guy named Jake Peterson, whispered something to his friend that made them both chuckle. Sarah ignored them and followed the directions to her assigned quarters. The barracks were exactly what she had expected. Long rows of bunk beds with thin mattresses and small lockers for personal belongings. Sarah chose a bottom bunk near the back corner, preferring to have fewer people around her. As she unpacked her few possessions, she could hear the other recruits getting to know each other. Most of them seemed to come from similar backgrounds: small towns, working-class families, dreams of serving their country or getting money for college. Later that afternoon, the recruits were marched to the mess hall for their first military meal. The food was plain but filling: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and bread rolls. Sarah ate quietly while listening to the conversations around her. Jake Peterson was holding court at a nearby table, regaling his audience with stories about his hunting exploits back in Montana. "I once took down a bull elk at 400 yards with one shot," Jake was saying, gesturing with his fork. "Clean kill, right through the heart. My dad said it was one of the best shots he'd ever seen, and he's been hunting for 30 years. Another recruit, Marcus Johnson from Alabama, nodded appreciatively. "That's impressive, man. I mostly hunt deer and wild boar, but I can usually hit my target at 200 yards, no problem. What about you guys? Anyone else here know their way around a rifle?" Several of the men shared their own shooting stories, each one trying to top the last. Sarah continued eating her meatloaf, remembering the countless hours she had spent practicing with her father's old hunting rifle. He had taught her that shooting wasn't about bragging or showing off. It was about patience, discipline, and respect for the weapon and the target. After dinner, the recruits were given an hour of free time before lights out. Sarah used this time to write a letter to her parents back in Texas. She told them about the journey to the base, her first impressions of the other recruits, and her determination to succeed in the program. She didn't mention the subtle looks and comments she had been receiving from some of the male recruits. She was used to being underestimated, and she had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words. As she sealed the envelope, Jake Peterson approached her bunk with a cocky smile. "So, Martinez," he said, leaning against the metal frame, What's your story? You ever shot anything bigger than a squirrel? Sarah looked up at him calmly. I've done some shooting, she replied simply. Jake laughed and shook his head. Some shooting, huh? Well, don't worry, sweetheart. When we get to the rifle range, us boys will show you how it's done. No shame in needing a little help. Firearms can be pretty intimidating for someone your size. A few other recruits had gathered around, grinning at Jake's comment. Sarah could see the amusement in their eyes, the assumption that she was out of her league. She had seen that look before, back home when she had wanted to join the high school shooting club or when she had applied for jobs at the local gun store. Thanks, she said quietly, closing her writing pad. I appreciate the offer. Jake seemed pleased with her response, taking it as acknowledgement of his superiority. No problem. We've got to stick together in this place, right? And don't take it personally, it's just biology. Men are naturally better at this stuff. Bigger hands, better hand-eye coordination, more upper body strength. It's nothing against you personally. Sarah nodded politely, but inside she was thinking about all the times her father had praised her natural shooting ability. He had always told her that the best shooters weren't necessarily the biggest or strongest people. They were the ones who could stay calm under pressure, control their breathing, and squeeze the trigger with perfect timing. As lights out was called and the barracks fell silent, Sarah lay on her narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new training exercises, and eventually, her first chance to prove herself on the rifle range. She closed her eyes and fell asleep, dreaming of the vast Texas sky and the satisfying ping of bullets hitting their targets. The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 in the morning, jolting every recruit from their sleep. Sarah was already half awake when the sound pierced the darkness of the barracks. She had been dreaming about home again, about the quiet mornings when she would help her father feed the cattle before the sun came up. Now, instead of the peaceful lowing of cows, she was surrounded by the groans and complaints of 40 tired recruits stumbling out of their bunks. Drill Sergeant Williams burst through the doors like a hurricane, flipping on every light switch he could find. Rise and shine, sunshine. Welcome to your new reality. You've got exactly 15 minutes to get dressed, make your bunks, and be standing in formation outside. Move, move, move! Sarah rolled out of bed and began the morning routine she had quickly learned over the past 2 weeks. Pull on the uniform, lace up the boots, make the bunk with corners so tight you could bounce a quarter off them. Around her, the other recruits were doing the same, though some were clearly struggling more than others. Jake Peterson was already dressed and helping his bunkmate Marcus with his bed-making technique. The trick is to get the sheets really tight, Jake was explaining, demonstrating his corner-folding method. Back home, my mom was a nurse, so she taught me how to make hospital corners. Comes in handy here. Sarah finished her bunk and grabbed her gear, joining the stream of recruits heading outside. The morning air was crisp and cool, a welcome relief from the heat that would come later in the day. She fell into formation automatically, having learned the precise spacing and positioning that Sergeant Williams demanded. The next few hours passed in a blur of physical training. Push-ups until their arms shook, sit-ups until their abs burned, and a 3-mile run around the base perimeter. Sarah had always been in good shape from ranch work, but military fitness was different. It demanded not just strength and endurance, but the ability to perform under pressure and keep going when every muscle in your body wanted to quit. During the run, she found herself keeping pace with some of the stronger male recruits. Her legs were shorter, so she had to work harder to maintain the same speed. But her cardiovascular conditioning from years of active ranch life served her well. Jake Peterson was running just ahead of her, breathing heavily but maintaining his position near the front of the group. Not bad. Martinez, he called over his shoulder during a brief moment when Sergeant Williams was distracted. You're keeping up better than I expected. Sarah didn't waste breath responding. She had learned that in military training every bit of energy was precious. Save the talking for later, when you weren't trying to prove you belonged here. After the morning physical training, the recruits were marched to the mess hall for breakfast. Sarah loaded her tray with scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and orange juice, then found a seat at a table with some of the quieter recruits. She had discovered that mealtimes were often when the most interesting conversations happened, when people let their guard down and revealed more about themselves. At the table next to hers, a group of the more vocal male recruits were discussing the upcoming weapons training that was scheduled to begin the following week. Sarah listened while pretending to focus on her eggs, learning as much as she could about what to expect. I heard they start us on the M16, said Tommy Rodriguez, a recruit from New Mexico. Basic rifle marksmanship, then move up to more advanced weapons if we show aptitude. Marcus Johnson nodded enthusiastically. I can't wait. I've been shooting since I was 12, mostly hunting rifles and shotguns. But military weapons are supposed to be something else entirely. Jake Peterson leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. My uncle served in the Marines, and he told me the key is to stay calm and remember your fundamentals. Breathing, stance, sight alignment, trigger control. He said most people fail because they get excited and rush their shots. Sarah found herself nodding slightly. That was exactly what her father had always taught her. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, he used to say. Take your time to do it right the first time, and you'll be faster than someone who rushes and has to do it over. After breakfast, the day continued with classroom instruction on military history, protocol, and basic combat theory. Sarah took careful notes, absorbing information about everything from the chain of command to proper radio communication procedures. She had always been a good student, and she approached military education the same way she had approached her college classes, with focus and determination to master the material. During one of the breaks, she overheard a conversation between two female recruits who had arrived the week before her. Jennifer Park was a computer science graduate from California, while Lisa Thompson had been a police officer in Ohio before enlisting. Have you heard anything about the weapons training? Jennifer was asking. I've never shot a gun before in my life. I'm honestly pretty nervous about it. Lisa smiled reassuringly. It's not as scary as you think. The instructors are really good at teaching the basics. Just remember to listen carefully and ask questions if you're confused. The worst thing you can do is pretend you understand when you don't. Sarah considered joining their conversation but decided against it. She preferred to observe and learn rather than reveal her own background too early. Let the others underestimate her capabilities for now. There would be time to show what she could do when it mattered. That afternoon brought more physical training, including an obstacle course that tested not just strength and speed, but problem-solving ability and teamwork. Sarah found herself paired with Jake Peterson for one of the exercises, where they had to work together to carry a heavy sandbag through a series of barriers and challenges. Okay, Martinez, Jake said as they surveyed the course. I'll take most of the weight since I'm bigger, and you can help guide and spot me through the tight spaces. Sound good? Sarah nodded, though she suspected she might be stronger than Jake realized. Ranch work had given her a wiry strength that wasn't immediately obvious from her small frame. As they began the course, she found herself carrying more of the load than Jake had expected, smoothly navigating obstacles and maintaining her grip on the sandbag even when her hands were slippery with sweat. Damn, Martinez, Jake panted as they crossed the finish line. You're tougher than you look. I thought I was going to have to carry you through some of those parts. Thanks, Sarah replied simply, though inwardly she was pleased. Every small victory was important in building her reputation among the other recruits. That evening, during the brief period of free time before lights out, Sarah sat on her bunk cleaning and organizing her gear. She had learned that maintaining her equipment was not just about military standards, but about developing the habits and discipline that would serve her throughout her career. Every belt buckle polished to a mirror shine, every piece of clothing folded to exact specifications. Jake Peterson approached her again, but this time his demeanor was different. Less cocky, more curious. Hey, Martinez, he said, sitting on the edge of the bunk across from hers. I've been watching you these past couple weeks, and I've got to ask, what's your background? You handle yourself like someone who's done this kind of thing before. Sarah looked up from the boot she was polishing. Just ranch work, she said. My family raises cattle in Texas, keeps you in shape. Jake nodded thoughtfully. That explains a lot. Ranch kids are usually pretty tough. My cousin grew up on a farm in Montana, and she could outwork most of the guys I know. He paused, then continued. I wanted to apologize for that comment I made the first night, about showing you how to shoot. That was pretty presumptuous of me. Sarah appreciated the apology, though she suspected Jake was motivated more by her performance in training than by genuine remorse. No problem, she said. I know you were just trying to be helpful. Still, Jake continued, I should have asked about your experience instead of assuming. For all I know, you might be a better shot than me. Sarah smiled slightly but didn't respond. She had learned that sometimes the best answer was no answer at all. Let people wonder, let them speculate. When the time came to prove herself, Her actions would speak louder than any words she could offer now. As the lights went out and the barracks fell silent, Sarah thought about the letter she would write to her parents tomorrow. She would tell them about the physical challenges, the new friendships forming, and the gradual respect she was earning from her fellow recruits. She would not tell them about her growing anticipation for weapons training, or about the quiet confidence that had been building inside her with each passing day. Soon, very soon, she would have a chance to show everyone exactly what she was capable of. The day Sarah had been quietly anticipating finally arrived on a Monday morning in her 4th week of basic training. After the usual pre-dawn routine of physical fitness and breakfast, Drill Sergeant Williams marched the company to a part of the base they had never seen before, the weapons training facility. The building was long and low, constructed of concrete and steel, with small windows and an air of serious purpose. "Today begins your introduction to the tools of your trade," Sergeant Williams announced as they stood in formation outside the building. "Inside you will learn to handle, maintain, and fire military weapons. This is not a game. This is not target practice for fun, and this is definitely not the time to show off. These weapons demand respect, discipline, and complete attention to detail." Sarah felt her pulse quicken slightly, though her expression remained calm and focused. Around her, she could sense the excitement and nervousness of her fellow recruits. Some were bouncing slightly on their feet, others were standing rigidly at attention, and a few looked genuinely worried about what was coming. They filed into the building and found themselves in a large classroom filled with tables, each one holding a disassembled M16 rifle. The weapons instructor, Staff Sergeant Cooper, was a lean man with gray hair and steady hands that spoke of decades of experience with firearms. His voice was quieter than Drill Sergeant Williams's, but it carried the same authority. "Before any of you touches a trigger," Staff Sergeant Cooper began, "you will learn every component of this weapon. You will know how to take it apart, clean it, reassemble it, and maintain it in perfect working condition. A soldier who cannot care for their weapon is a soldier who cannot be trusted with their own life or the lives of their comrades." For the next 3 hours, Sarah immersed herself in learning the intricate details of the M16. She memorized the names and functions of every spring, pin, and mechanism. Her fingers quickly became familiar with the process of field stripping and reassembling the rifle, movements that would need to become automatic and effortless. Jake Peterson was sitting at the table next to hers, and she could hear him quietly helping some of the other recruits who were struggling with the disassembly process. His experience with hunting rifles was clearly helping him understand the mechanical principles, and he was generous with sharing his knowledge. "The key is to remember the order," he was explaining to Jennifer Park, who was looking frustrated with a spring that kept popping out of place. "If you do the steps in the same sequence every time, it becomes muscle memory. Watch, bolt carrier group comes out first, then the firing pin, then the bolt." Sarah found the mechanical aspects intuitive and satisfying. Growing up on a ranch had required her to understand and maintain all kinds of equipment: tractors, generators, water pumps, and yes, firearms. Her father had always insisted that anyone who used a tool should understand how it worked and how to fix it when it broke. During the lunch break, the conversation in the mess hall was dominated by excitement about the morning's training. Sarah listened to her fellow recruits comparing their experiences and speculating about when they would actually get to fire the weapons. "I heard we don't get to shoot until we pass a written test on safety, procedures, and weapon maintenance," said Marcus Johnson. "Makes sense, I guess. They want to make sure we know what we're doing before they give us live ammunition." Lisa Thompson nodded. "That's what they did in police training, too. Hours and hours of classroom work before we ever saw the inside of a firing range. It's all about building good habits from the beginning." That afternoon brought more weapons training, this time focusing on proper stance, grip, and sight alignment. Staff Sergeant Cooper moved between the recruits, making small adjustments to their positioning and technique. When he reached Sarah, he watched her dry fire the unloaded rifle several times before nodding approvingly. "Good natural stance," he commented. "Solid base, rifle well seated in the shoulder."
"Have you had firearms training before?"
"Some, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "My father taught me to shoot when I was young. It shows. Keep practicing the fundamentals and remember that good habits formed now will serve you for your entire career." Sarah noticed that Staff Sergeant Cooper spent more time with some of the other recruits, particularly those who had never handled firearms before. Jennifer Park was struggling with the concept of sight alignment. while Tommy Rodriguez kept flinching in anticipation of recoil, even though they were using empty weapons. Jake Peterson seemed to be having no trouble with the basic concepts, though Sarah noticed that his stance was a bit too rigid, and his grip was tighter than it needed to be. These were small details that probably wouldn't matter much at close range, but could affect accuracy over longer distances. The days that followed established a routine of morning physical training, followed by weapons instruction. They learned about different types of ammunition, proper storage and handling procedures, and the various malfunctions that could occur and how to clear them. Sarah absorbed every detail, asking occasional questions but mostly listening and learning. On Friday of that week, Staff Sergeant Cooper announced that they would begin live-fire exercises the following Monday. The recruits who passed their written examination on weapon safety and maintenance would be allowed to participate. Those who failed would receive additional instruction and testing. Sarah spent the weekend reviewing her notes and practicing the disassembly and reassembly procedures. She could now completely break down and rebuild an M16 in under 2 minutes, and she had memorized every safety protocol and maintenance requirement. She was ready. Monday morning brought a different kind of energy to the barracks. The recruits were quieter than usual, focused on the day ahead. Sarah could see a mix of excitement and nervousness in the faces around her as they prepared for their first experience with live ammunition. The written test was administered first thing after breakfast. Sarah completed hers quickly and confidently, then waited while the others finished. When Staff Sergeant Cooper collected the papers and announced that scoring would take an hour, the tension in the room was palpable. During the wait, Jake Peterson approached Sarah in the hallway outside the classroom. "How do you think you did?" he asked. "All right, I think," Sarah replied. "The material was pretty straightforward if you studied it." Jake nodded. "Yeah, I think I did okay too. I'm more nervous about the actual shooting, to be honest. It's been a while since I've fired a rifle and never with this much pressure." Sarah was surprised by his admission. Throughout training, Jake had projected confidence and experience, positioning himself as one of the natural leaders among the recruits. This moment of vulnerability made her see him in a different light. "You'll do fine," she said. "You know the fundamentals and you've got good mechanical understanding of the weapon." When the test results were announced, Sarah was not surprised to learn that she had scored a perfect 100%. Jake had scored 96, missing only a question about the maximum effective range of the weapon. Jennifer Park had barely passed with a 71, while Tommy Rodriguez would need to retake the test after additional study. The successful recruits were then marched to the outdoor firing range, a long facility with covered shooting positions and targets at various distances. The smell of gunpowder and the distant sound of gunfire from other training exercises filled the air. Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her as she surveyed the range layout and target positions. Staff Sergeant Cooper addressed the group before they began. "Today you will fire your weapon for the first time under controlled conditions. You will follow every command exactly as given. You will not load your weapon until instructed. You will not fire until instructed. You will cease fire immediately when commanded. Any deviation from these instructions will result in immediate removal from the range and remedial training." The recruits were divided into small groups and assigned to different firing positions. Sarah found herself in the same group as Jake Peterson, Marcus Johnson, and Lisa Thompson. They would be shooting at targets 25 meters away, starting in the prone position with the rifle supported by sandbags. As she settled into position behind her assigned weapon, Sarah felt the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. The stock fit perfectly into the pocket between her shoulder and collarbone, and the grip felt natural in her hands. She adjusted her position slightly, finding the optimal angle and support for maximum stability. Around her, the other recruits were making similar adjustments, though some seemed less comfortable than others. Jake was taking his time to get set up properly, while Marcus was fidgeting with his position, unable to find a comfortable stance. Staff Sergeant Cooper walked the line, checking each recruit's position and making corrections where necessary. When he reached Sarah, he paused and observed her setup carefully. "Outstanding position, Martinez. Textbook form. Natural shooter. My father taught me well, Sergeant. It shows. Maintain that exact position and remember your breathing." As the instructor moved on to the next recruit, Sarah closed her eyes briefly and centered herself. In a few minutes, she would have her first opportunity to show her fellow recruits what she was truly capable of. All those hours of practice with her father, All those tin cans lined up on fence posts, all that patient instruction about breathing and trigger control, it was all leading to this moment. The command came. Load and lock. Prepare to engage targets at 25 meters. The metallic click of magazines being inserted into rifles echoed across the firing line as each recruit loaded their weapon according to Staff Sergeant Cooper's precise instructions. Sarah's movements were smooth and deliberate as she loaded her magazine, chambered around, and engaged the safety. The M16 felt natural in her hands, like an extension of her own body rather than a foreign tool. Safety remains on until the command to fire, Staff Sergeant Cooper announced, walking behind the line of prone recruits. Remember your breathing pattern. Natural respiratory pause, sight alignment, smooth trigger squeeze. Do not jerk the trigger. Do not hold your breath too long. Trust your training. Sarah positioned herself behind her rifle, settling into the prone position she had practiced countless times over the past week. Her left elbow was planted firmly on the ground, supporting the weight of the weapon while her right hand gripped the pistol grip with just the right amount of pressure. Her cheek found its natural spot against the stock, bringing her dominant eye into perfect alignment with the rear sight aperture. To her left, Jake Peterson was making final adjustments to his position. She could see tension in his shoulders and noticed that he was gripping the rifle more tightly than necessary. To her right, Marcus Johnson was breathing heavily, clearly nervous about his first live fire experience. Targets to your front are standard 25-meter zeroing targets, the instructor continued. You will fire 3 rounds semi-automatic on my command. Observe your target through your sights, acquire your sight picture, and engage when ready. Commence firing. The word commence was barely out of Staff Sergeant Cooper's mouth when Sarah disengaged her safety and settled into her shooting position. She had done this exact sequence thousands of times with her father's hunting rifle back home. The target came into focus through her sights, a black circle on white paper, clearly defined against the earthen backstop behind the range. Her breathing slowed automatically, falling into the rhythm her father had taught her years ago. Inhale, exhale halfway, natural pause, squeeze. The trigger broke cleanly with just the right amount of pressure, and the rifle recoiled smoothly into her shoulder. Even before the brass casing hit the ground beside her, Sarah was already settling back into position for her second shot. The first shot had felt perfect. That satisfying sensation when everything comes together exactly right. Sight picture, breathing, trigger control, follow through. She acquired her target again and repeated the process. Second shot away just as clean as the first. Then the third, completing her initial string of fire. Around her, other rifles were firing at different intervals. Some recruits were taking their time, carefully working through each step of the process. Others seemed to be rushing slightly, eager to get their shots downrange. Jake Peterson was firing steadily but deliberately, while Marcus was taking longer between shots, clearly working to control his nerves. Cease fire, cease fire, Staff Sergeant Cooper called out. Make your weapons safe and step back from the firing line. Sarah engaged her safety, removed the magazine, and locked the bolt open to visually confirm that her chamber was empty. She had been through this process so many times that it was completely automatic, but she knew the instructors were watching for any sign of carelessness or shortcut. Range detail, check and post targets, came the next command. A group of recruits who had not yet fired jogged downrange to examine and replace the targets. This was always the moment of truth, where the theoretical knowledge and practice would be revealed in the form of holes in paper. Sarah felt confident about her shots, but she had learned long ago not to count on anything until she could actually see the results. The range detail worked quickly and efficiently, calling out hit counts as they examined each target. Position 1, 3 hits. Position 2, 2 hits, 1 miss. Position 3, 3 hits. The reports continued down the line as Sarah waited patiently for her target to be examined. When the recruit checking her target held it up, there was a moment of silence before he called out, Position 7, 3 hits, tight group. Even from 25 meters away, Sarah could see that her 3 shots had formed a cluster in the center of the target that could be covered by a quarter. Staff Sergeant Cooper walked over to examine her target more closely. He held it up, studied the shot placement, then looked down the line at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. Outstanding shooting, Martinez. Textbook group, perfect center placement. Sarah could feel the eyes of her fellow recruits on her as the instructor continued down the line, examining other targets. Jake Peterson had fired a respectable group with all 3 shots hitting the target, though not as tightly clustered as Sarah's. Marcus had managed 2 hits out of 3, which was considered acceptable for a first-time shooter. As the range detail returned with the new targets, Sarah heard whispered conversations among the other recruits. Some were complimentary, expressing genuine admiration for her shooting. Others seemed more skeptical, suggesting that beginner's luck might have played a role in her performance. "Next relay, prepare to fire," Staff Sergeant Cooper announced. The recruits who had been checking targets now took their positions on the firing line, while those who had just shot moved to the observation area behind the range. During this break, Jake Peterson approached Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and respect in his expression. "That was incredible shooting, Martinez. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "Just practice," Sarah replied simply. She had learned that the less she said about her background, the more people would fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. "Just practice?" Jake pressed. "Come on. That kind of accuracy doesn't come from casual plinking. You've had serious training somewhere." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus Johnson joined their conversation. "I heard the instructor say it was textbook form. My dad was in the Army 20 years ago, and he always said natural shooters were rare. Either you have it or you don't." Sarah appreciated Marcus's comment but knew that natural talent was only part of the equation. The thousands of rounds she had fired under her father's patient guidance, the countless hours spent learning to read wind and adjust for different ranges, the discipline of proper shooting fundamentals drilled into her from childhood. All of that was what had produced today's results. The second relay completed their firing, and then it was time for Sarah's group to shoot again. This time, Staff Sergeant Cooper announced that they would be shooting from the kneeling position at 50 meters. This was a more challenging position that required greater stability and control, and the increased distance would reveal any flaws in technique. Sarah adjusted her position behind the rifle, dropping into the kneeling stance they had practiced extensively during dry fire training. Her left knee was on the ground, right foot planted firmly, left elbow resting on her left knee to create a stable shooting platform. The position felt natural and comfortable, though she could see some of the other recruits struggling to find their balance. The 50-meter targets were smaller and more difficult to see clearly, requiring greater precision in sight alignment and trigger control. Sarah settled into her shooting routine, controlling her breathing and focusing completely on the mechanics of accurate shooting. The first shot broke cleanly, the rifle recoiling straight back without disturbing her sight picture. She fired her remaining 2 shots with the same deliberate precision, then made her weapon safe and waited for the range detail to check targets. This time she felt even more confident about her performance. The kneeling position had felt solid and stable, and each shot had felt like a perfect execution of proper technique. When her target was examined, the result was even better than her first string of fire. 3 shots in a group that could be covered by a nickel, all centered perfectly in the target's scoring area. Staff Sergeant Cooper held up the target for everyone to see, and this time his expression was one of unmistakable impressed respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the group, "this is what perfect shooting looks like. 3 shots, 50 meters kneeling position, and a group size that most experienced marksmen would be proud to achieve. Martinez, step forward." Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly as she approached the instructor. She wasn't sure if she was about to be praised or questioned, but she maintained her composure and professional demeanor. "Martinez, where did you receive your shooting training?" Staff Sergeant Cooper asked. "My father taught me, Sergeant. We have a ranch in Texas, and he started teaching me when I was young." The instructor nodded thoughtfully. "Your father did an exceptional job. Your fundamentals are flawless, and your natural shooting ability is extraordinary. Have you ever considered specialized marksmanship training?" "I'm not sure what that means, Sergeant." "It means, Martinez, that you have the potential to be more than just a good soldier with a rifle. You might have what it takes to become a precision marksman, what some people call a sniper." He paused, studying her reaction. "It would mean additional training, higher standards, and greater responsibility. But for someone with your natural ability, it could be an exceptional career path." Sarah felt a thrill of excitement that she carefully kept from showing on her face. This was beyond anything she had imagined when she enlisted. To be recognized for her shooting ability, to be offered advanced training, it was like discovering that a childhood hobby could become the foundation of an entire military career. "I would be very interested in learning more about that, Sergeant." she replied, maintaining her professional tone despite the excitement building inside her. Staff Sergeant Cooper nodded approvingly. We'll discuss this further after today's training is complete. For now, let's continue with the scheduled exercises. But Martinez, keep doing exactly what you're doing. Your consistency is remarkable. As Sarah returned to her position, she could feel the atmosphere among her fellow recruits had shifted. The initial skepticism about her first excellent performance had been replaced by grudging respect and genuine curiosity. Jake Peterson was looking at her with new eyes, clearly reassessing his earlier assumptions about her capabilities. The final exercise of the day involved shooting from the standing position at 25 meters, which was considered the most challenging of the basic marksmanship positions. Without any external support for the rifle, accuracy depended entirely on the shooter's ability to create a stable platform, using only their body and proper technique. Sarah approached this challenge with the same methodical focus she had applied to the previous exercises. She established her stance with feet shoulder-width apart, turned slightly at an angle to the target, and brought the rifle up to her shoulder with smooth, controlled movements. The weapon settled naturally into position and she began her breathing cycle. The standing position required more patience than the supported positions. Sarah had to wait for the natural wobble of her sight picture to minimize before taking each shot. Her father had taught her that everyone wobbles when shooting standing. The key was to fire the shot when the wobble was smallest and the sight alignment was closest to perfect. Her first shot felt good, though not quite as controlled as her previous efforts. The second shot was better as she settled into the rhythm of the position. The third shot felt perfect, that magical moment when everything comes together and the rifle seems to fire itself at exactly the right instant. When the targets were checked this time, Sarah's group was slightly larger than her previous efforts but still well within the excellent range. More importantly, all 3 shots were centered in the scoring area, demonstrating the consistency that impressed the instructors more than any single perfect shot. As the range exercise concluded and the recruits began cleaning their weapons, Staff Sergeant Cooper pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. They walked to a quiet area away from the other recruits, where he could speak more freely about the opportunities he had mentioned. Martinez, I've been a marksmanship instructor for 15 years, he began, and I've trained thousands of soldiers. What I saw from you today is genuinely exceptional. Not just good, not just above average, exceptional. The kind of natural shooting ability that appears maybe once every few years. Sarah listened intently, still processing the implications of what he was telling her. Specialized marksmanship training, what we call sniper school, is extremely demanding, he continued. The physical requirements are intense, the mental pressure is enormous, and the standards are higher than anything you've experienced in basic training. Most candidates who attempt the program don't complete it successfully. He paused, studying her reaction before continuing. But for someone with your natural ability and demonstrated discipline, it represents an opportunity to serve at the highest levels of military precision. Snipers are force multipliers. One well-trained marksman can have the impact of an entire squad in the right situation. Sarah found her voice. What would be the next steps, Sergeant? First, you would need to complete basic training with distinction, which based on your performance so far shouldn't be a problem. Then you would volunteer for advanced infantry training, followed by a marksmanship evaluation course. If you perform well in those programs, you could be recommended for the Special Operations Target Interdiction course, the formal sniper training program. The weight of this opportunity was beginning to sink in. Sarah had enlisted with the goal of serving her country and gaining valuable training and experience. She had never imagined that her childhood shooting lessons could open doors to such specialized and important work. I would be very interested in pursuing that path, Sergeant, she said firmly. Staff Sergeant Cooper smiled for the first time that day. I thought you might be. I'm going to make some notes in your training record and speak with your company commander about your potential. Keep performing the way you have been, and I believe you'll have every opportunity to pursue this specialization. As they walked back toward the other recruits, Sarah felt a profound sense of purpose settling over her. The path ahead would be challenging and demanding, but for the first time since enlisting, she could see a clear connection between her personal strengths and her military service. The other recruits were finishing their weapon cleaning and preparing to return to the barracks. Jake Peterson approached her as she completed her final inspection of her rifle. So, he said with a grin, I'm guessing some shooting was a bit of an understatement when I asked about your experience that first night. Sarah smiled back. Maybe a little. A little? Marcus Johnson had overheard and joined the conversation. Martinez, you just outshot everyone here by a mile. That wasn't a little understatement. That was like saying the Grand Canyon is a small ditch. For the first time since arriving at basic training, Sarah felt truly comfortable with her fellow recruits. The initial skepticism and condescension had been replaced by genuine respect and camaraderie. She had proven herself through performance rather than words, which was exactly how she preferred to handle things. As they marched back to the barracks, Sarah thought about the letter she would write to her parents that evening. She would tell them about her shooting performance, about the instructor's praise, and about the potential opportunities that might lie ahead. Most importantly, she would thank her father for all those patient hours of instruction that had prepared her for this moment. The young woman who had stepped off the transport truck 4 weeks ago, quietly enduring the assumptions and doubts of her fellow recruits, was gone. In her place was a soldier who had found her calling and proven her worth. The real journey was just beginning. 3 months after that first day on the rifle range, Sarah found herself standing in formation outside a nondescript building at Fort Benning, Georgia. The advanced infantry training facility looked much like any other military structure, but she knew that what happened inside would determine whether her dreams of becoming a specialized marksman would become reality or remain just an ambitious goal. The weeks following her exceptional performance in basic training had passed in a blur of continued excellence and growing reputation. Word of her shooting abilities had spread beyond her immediate training company, and she had found herself the subject of curious attention from instructors and fellow recruits alike. More importantly, Staff Sergeant Cooper had been true to his word, documenting her performance and recommending her for advanced marksmanship evaluation. Now, alongside 15 other soldiers selected from various training installations across the country, Sarah was about to begin the first phase of what could eventually lead to sniper school. The Advanced Marksmanship Assessment course was designed to identify soldiers with the potential for precision shooting roles and provide them with enhanced training in long-range marksmanship. The other candidates were an impressive group. Most were male, most were larger than Sarah, and all had demonstrated exceptional shooting ability in their basic training. As they stood in the Georgia heat waiting for their first briefing, Sarah could hear quiet conversations about previous experience and expectations for the course. "I heard the washout rate is over 60%, one candidate was saying. "They're not just looking for good shooters. They want people who can handle the mental pressure and physical demands of precision marksmanship." Another soldier nodded grimly. "My drill sergeant told me they'll put us through scenarios designed to test how we perform under stress. Sleep deprivation, time pressure, simulated combat conditions, the whole 9 yards." Sarah listened to these conversations with interest but didn't participate. She had learned during basic training that it was often better to observe and absorb, rather than contribute to speculation and anxiety. She would find out soon enough what the course demanded, and she preferred to focus her energy on meeting those demands, rather than worrying about them in advance. The building doors opened and a tall, lean sergeant emerged. Master Sergeant Williams was clearly a different breed from the drill instructors they had known in basic training. His movements were precise and economical, his uniform immaculate but not showy, and his eyes held the steady, measuring gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly and accurately. "Welcome to the Advanced Marksmanship Assessment course," he began without preamble. "Over the next 4 weeks you will be evaluated not just on your shooting ability, but on your capacity to perform precise, mission-critical tasks under various forms of stress and pressure. Some of you will discover that you have the mental and physical attributes necessary for specialized marksmanship roles. Others will learn that their talents lie elsewhere." He paused, his gaze moving methodically across each candidate. "This is not basic training. We will not waste time teaching you to march in formation or make your bed to regulation standards. We assume you have already mastered those fundamental military skills. What we will do is push your shooting abilities, your mental resilience, and your professional judgment to their limits." The next few hours were spent in administrative processing and initial evaluations. Each candidate underwent a comprehensive physical examination, psychological assessment, and review of their military records. Sarah found herself answering detailed questions about her shooting background, her motivations for pursuing advanced marksmanship training, and her understanding of what specialized precision roles might entail. During the psychological evaluation, the interviewing officer asked her a question that surprised her with its directness. Specialized marksmanship roles often require soldiers to operate independently or in very small teams, sometimes for extended periods. They also involve making critical decisions that can have life or death consequences. How do you handle pressure and isolation? Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. I've always been comfortable working independently. Growing up on a ranch, I spent a lot of time alone handling responsibilities that couldn't wait for help to arrive. As for pressure, I've found that preparation and focus help me perform better under stress rather than worse. The officer made notes and continued with several more questions designed to assess her mental stability, decision-making ability, and capacity to handle the unique stresses of precision marksmanship roles. That afternoon, the candidates were taken to a rifle range unlike anything Sarah had seen before. Instead of the straightforward, flat-firing lanes of basic training, this facility featured varied terrain, multiple target types at different ranges, and environmental factors designed to simulate real-world shooting conditions. Master Sergeant Williams addressed the group before they began their first evaluation. Today we will establish baseline performance standards for each of you. You will engage targets at ranges from 100 to 600 meters, using the M24 sniper weapon system. Some of you may not have experience with this particular rifle, but the fundamentals of marksmanship remain the same regardless of the weapon system. Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her as she examined the M24 for the first time. The rifle was heavier than the M16 she had trained with a different balance and feel. But the basic principles her father had taught her remained applicable. Sight alignment, breathing control, trigger squeeze, follow-through. These fundamentals transcended any particular weapon. The first phase of testing involved engaging stationary targets at known distances under ideal conditions. This was designed to assess pure shooting ability, without the complications of environmental factors or time pressure. Sarah approached her assigned shooting position with the same methodical preparation she had developed during basic training. As she settled into the prone position behind the M24, she took time to adjust the rifle's scope and familiarize herself with its particular characteristics. The weapon felt solid and purposeful in her hands, and the magnified optic provided a clear, detailed view of the target's downrange. Her first shot at 100 meters felt perfect from the moment she squeezed the trigger. The rifle's heavier weight and more substantial construction absorbed the recoil smoothly, allowing her to maintain sight picture and observe the bullet's impact. The shot struck exactly where she had aimed, dead center in the target's scoring area. She continued through the sequence of prescribed targets, engaging each one with the same deliberate precision. 200 meters, 300, 400. Each shot was carefully planned, executed, and evaluated before moving to the next target. By the time she engaged the final target at 600 meters, she felt completely comfortable with the weapon and confident in her performance. When the range exercise concluded and targets were evaluated, Sarah learned that she had achieved a perfect score on the baseline marksmanship test. Every shot had struck within the required scoring area, and most had clustered in the center of their respective targets. More importantly, her consistency across all ranges demonstrated the kind of fundamental shooting ability that the instructors were looking for. Master Sergeant Williams reviewed her target with obvious approval. Outstanding performance, Martinez. Your consistency across all ranges is particularly impressive. Many shooters can achieve good results at shorter distances but struggle when the range increases. Your fundamentals are clearly solid. As the other candidates completed their evaluations, Sarah overheard conversations that revealed the wide variation in performance. Some had struggled with the longer range targets. Others had difficulty adjusting to the different characteristics of the M24, and a few had been visibly nervous about the testing environment. That evening, the candidates were housed in a separate barracks facility and given time to study technical manuals covering advanced marksmanship theory, ballistics, and the specific characteristics of precision weapon systems. Sarah found the technical material fascinating, particularly the sections covering external ballistics and environmental factors that could affect shot placement. Over dinner in the small mess facility, she found herself in conversation with two other candidates who had performed well during the day's testing. Corporal Mike Thompson was a former college competitive shooter from Oregon while specialist David Chen had grown up hunting in rural Pennsylvania. That M24 is a beautiful weapon, Mike was saying. The scope clarity is incredible compared to what we used in basic training. I could see details on the 600-meter target that would have been invisible with iron sights. David nodded enthusiastically. The trigger is amazing too. So much cleaner and more predictable than the M16. I can see why precision marksmen prefer bolt-action rifles for long-range work. Sarah contributed to the conversation, sharing her observations about the weapon's characteristics and her impressions of the day's testing. She was pleased to find that her performance had earned her respect from these experienced shooters, and she appreciated the opportunity to discuss technical aspects of marksmanship with people who shared her interests and dedication. As the evening wound down and candidates prepared for the next day's training, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from that first day of basic training, when her fellow recruits had assumed she would need help learning to handle firearms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and more demanding tests, but she felt ready to meet them with the same combination of preparation, focus, and determination that had brought her this far. The young woman who had once been dismissed as too small and inexperienced to handle military weapons was now competing with the best marksmen the military had to offer. And she was not just competing, she was excelling. The second week of the Advanced Marksmanship Assessment course brought challenges that tested far more than just shooting accuracy. Sarah found herself facing scenarios designed to evaluate how precision marksmen perform when everything doesn't go according to plan. These exercises would separate those with mere shooting talent from those with the mental toughness required for specialized roles. The morning began before dawn with what Master Sergeant Williams called stress inoculation training. The candidates were roused from sleep at 3 a.m., given 15 minutes to dress and grab their gear, then marched to a range where they would engage targets while dealing with various forms of deliberately induced stress. In real operational environments, Williams explained as the groggy candidates assembled in the darkness, you will not have the luxury of perfect conditions, unlimited time, or freedom from distractions. Today we begin learning how to maintain precision performance when everything around you is designed to degrade that performance. The first exercise involved engaging targets while instructors used various noisemakers, blank ammunition, air horns, and recorded sounds of combat to create an environment of controlled chaos. Sarah had experienced nothing like this during her ranch upbringing or basic training, but she found that her ability to focus intensely on the fundamentals of shooting helped her filter out the distractions. As she settled into position behind the M24, the cacophony of artificial battle sounds erupted around her. Other candidates were clearly struggling with the noise and confusion, but Sarah discovered that she could create a bubble of concentration that allowed her to maintain her shooting routine despite the chaos. Her father had always taught her that shooting was as much mental as physical, and this training was proving the truth of that lesson. Her first shot under these conditions felt slightly less controlled than her baseline performance, but it still struck the target accurately. By her third shot, she had learned to time her trigger squeeze during brief lulls in the noise, and her accuracy returned to its previous high standard. When the exercise concluded, Master Sergeant Williams reviewed the results with obvious interest in how different candidates had responded to the stress. Sarah learned that she had maintained her accuracy better than most, dropping only slightly from her perfect baseline scores. Good adaptation, Martinez, Williams commented as he reviewed her targets. Some shooters fall apart completely when faced with unexpected conditions. You maintained composure and found ways to work within the environment, rather than fighting against it. The next phase of stress testing involved time pressure. Candidates were given realistic scenarios where they had limited time to range targets, calculate environmental factors, and deliver accurate shots. This exercise tested not just shooting ability, but the mental agility to process information quickly and make correct decisions under pressure. Sarah found herself assigned to a scenario where she had to engage multiple targets at different ranges within a 3-minute time limit. She was given basic information about wind conditions and target distances, but she had to verify and apply this information rapidly while maintaining shooting accuracy. The key, she realized, was to trust her preparation and avoid second-guessing herself. She had spent hours studying ballistic tables and environmental factors, and now she needed to apply that knowledge confidently, rather than hesitating over every calculation. Her first target was at 300 meters in a mild crosswind. She made quick adjustments to her scope, settled into position, and took the shot without overthinking the process. The bullet struck exactly where she had aimed. She immediately moved to the second target at 450 meters, made her calculations and adjustments, and fired again. Another clean hit. By the time she engaged her final target at 200 meters, she was operating in a state of focused automaticity, where training and instinct combined to produce rapid, accurate results. When time was called, Sarah had successfully engaged all assigned targets within the time limit while maintaining excellent accuracy. Several other candidates had either missed targets due to hasty shots or failed to engage all targets within the time constraint. Master Sergeant Williams seemed particularly pleased with her performance. "Excellent work under pressure, Martinez. You demonstrated the ability to process information quickly and execute precisely without rushing or panicking. These are exactly the qualities we look for in precision marksmen." The afternoon brought what many candidates considered the most challenging aspect of the course: psychological pressure testing. Each candidate was required to engage targets while being deliberately distracted, criticized, and pressured by instructors who were trained to identify and exploit individual weaknesses. Sarah approached her assigned shooting position knowing that the instructor would attempt to undermine her confidence and disrupt her concentration. She had decided in advance that her strategy would be to acknowledge the instructor's presence, but not engage with his comments, focusing entirely on the mechanical process of accurate shooting. As she began her preparation routine, the instructor started a steady stream of commentary designed to shake her confidence. "Martinez, you're taking too long to set up. Real targets don't wait for you to get comfortable. Your position looks unstable. That's not going to work at longer ranges. Are you sure you've calculated the wind correctly? That last shot looked off." Sarah continued her preparation without responding, running through the same mental checklist she had developed over months of training. The instructor's comments were clearly designed to plant seeds of doubt and disrupt her concentration. But she found that focusing intensely on technical details helped her ignore the psychological pressure. Her first shot was clean and accurate, striking the center of the target despite the continued stream of criticism from the instructor. She cycled the bolt, chambered a new round, and prepared for her second shot while the instructor escalated his efforts to distract her. "That was lucky, Martinez. Let's see if you can do it again when it matters. Your breathing rhythm is off. You're holding too long. That trigger squeeze was jerky. I can see your hands shaking from here." None of this was true, and Sarah knew it. Her breathing was controlled, her trigger squeeze was smooth, and her hands were rock steady. She fired her second shot with the same deliberate precision as the first, achieving another center hit. The instructor's criticisms became more creative and more personal, but Sarah had found her zone of concentration and maintained it throughout the exercise. When the session ended, Master Sergeant Williams approached her with what might have been the hint of a smile. "Outstanding performance under psychological pressure, Martinez. That instructor has broken down candidates who were excellent shooters but couldn't handle mental warfare. You demonstrated exceptional focus and mental toughness." That evening, the candidates were given their first significant break since arriving at the course. Sarah used the time to write a detailed letter to her parents, describing the intensity of the training and her continued success in the program. She was careful not to reveal any classified information, but she wanted them to understand how the skills her father had taught her were being applied and expanded in ways she had never imagined. During dinner, she found herself in conversation with Corporal Thompson and Specialist Chen again, comparing their experiences with the day's stress testing. Both had performed well, though neither had maintained their accuracy as consistently as Sarah under the various pressure conditions. "I don't know how you stayed so calm during that psychological pressure test," Mike Thompson was saying. "That instructor was relentless. He found every insecurity I didn't even know I had and hammered on it for 20 minutes straight." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "I think growing up with my father helped prepare me for that kind of thing. He was never mean about it, but he always pushed me to shoot well even when things weren't perfect. Bad weather, distractions, pressure to perform. He taught me that the fundamentals work regardless of what's happening around you." David Chen looked thoughtful. "That makes sense. Most of us learned to shoot in controlled environments where everything was set up for success. This course is teaching us how to succeed when conditions are deliberately set up for failure." As the evening progressed, Sarah reflected on how much her perspective had changed since basic training. The young woman who had quietly endured assumptions about her capabilities was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own strengths and was confident in her ability to meet increasingly demanding challenges. Tomorrow would bring new tests and new opportunities to prove herself worthy of the specialized training that lay ahead. But tonight, for the first time since beginning her military career, Sarah felt truly confident that she was exactly where she belonged and pursuing exactly the right path for her unique combination of skills and temperament. The girl who had learned to shoot tin cans off fence posts in rural Texas was becoming a precision marksman, capable of performing under the most demanding conditions the military could devise. And she was just getting started. The final week of the Advanced Marksmanship Assessment course arrived with an atmosphere of anticipation and nervous energy that Sarah had not experienced since her first day of basic training. Of the 16 candidates who had begun the program, only 9 remained. The others had been eliminated due to various combinations of insufficient shooting performance, inability to handle stress, or failure to demonstrate the mental attributes required for precision marksmanship roles. Sarah had not only survived, but excelled throughout every phase of the course. Her shooting scores remained consistently at the top of the class. Her performance under stress had impressed every instructor, and her professional demeanor had earned respect from both peers and supervisors. Now, as they approached the final evaluation that would determine who received recommendations for sniper school, she felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited. The final test was designed to simulate as closely as possible the conditions and pressures that precision marksmen might face in actual operational environments. Candidates would be given a complex scenario requiring them to demonstrate not just shooting accuracy, but tactical thinking, environmental assessment, equipment management, and decision-making under pressure. Master Sergeant Williams briefed the remaining candidates on the exercise parameters. You will be inserted into a realistic field environment where you must locate, range, and engage multiple targets while dealing with changing weather conditions, time constraints, and incomplete information. Your performance will be evaluated not just on accuracy, but on your ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances and make sound tactical decisions. Sarah listened intently as Williams continued outlining the scenario. Each candidate would work independently, navigating to predetermined positions where they would receive target assignments and mission updates. The exercise would unfold over a full day, testing endurance and concentration as well as shooting skills. The morning began with a 5-mile movement to the first position, carrying full equipment including the M24 rifle, ammunition, observation equipment, and survival gear. Sarah had trained for this type of physical challenge throughout the course, and she found the movement demanding, but manageable. Her ranch background had given her a foundation of physical fitness that served her well in military training. At the first position, she received her initial target assignment. Engage 3 targets at ranges between 400 and 700 meters, with specific time windows for each engagement. The targets were positioned in realistic terrain with varying backgrounds and concealment, requiring careful observation to locate and identify correctly. Sarah established her shooting position in a concealed location that provided clear fields of fire to all assigned targets while minimizing her exposure to observation. She spent several minutes studying the terrain through her scope, identifying each target and planning her engagement sequence. The environmental conditions were challenging. A gusty crosswind that varied in intensity and direction, partly cloudy skies that created changing light conditions. Her first target was a silhouette at 400 meters positioned among trees that partially obscured the target area. Sarah calculated her wind compensation based on observation of grass movement and mirage patterns, made her scope adjustments, and settled into her shooting position. The target was only exposed during specific time windows, requiring her to be ready to engage immediately when the opportunity presented itself. When the target appeared, Sarah was ready. Her shot struck center mass, a clean hit that would have been immediately effective in a tactical situation. She immediately moved her aim to the second target at 550 meters, made new calculations for the increased range and different wind conditions, and waited for her next engagement window. The second shot was even more challenging due to the longer range and a target that was only partially exposed behind cover. Sarah had to time her shot precisely to hit the small visible portion of the target, while accounting for bullet flight time and target movement. Her shot struck exactly where she had aimed. Another clean hit that demonstrated both technical precision and tactical judgment. The third target was the most demanding, 700 meters in difficult wind conditions with a very small engagement window. Sarah spent extra time reading the environmental conditions, using all the techniques she had learned for long-range wind estimation. The shot felt perfect from the moment she squeezed the trigger, and the bullet struck precisely where she had intended. After completing her first set of targets, Sarah received new orders to move to a different position and engage additional targets under changed conditions. This phase of the exercise tested her ability to adapt to new environments and maintain performance while dealing with physical fatigue and time pressure. The second position required her to engage targets while dealing with mirage effects from hot ground and varying light conditions as clouds moved across the sun. These environmental factors could significantly affect target visibility and bullet trajectory, requiring constant attention and adjustment. Sarah drew on all her training and experience to analyze the conditions and make appropriate adjustments to her equipment and technique. She engaged 4 additional targets at ranges from 300 to 650 meters, achieving hits on all targets despite the challenging conditions. As the day progressed, the scenarios became increasingly complex and demanding. Sarah found herself dealing with equipment malfunctions that she had to diagnose and correct under time pressure, target assignments that required careful prioritization and tactical thinking, and environmental conditions that pushed her technical skills to their limits. Throughout each challenge, she maintained the same methodical approach that had served her since basic training: focus on fundamentals, trust her training, adapt to conditions rather than fighting them, and execute each task with precision and professionalism. When the final exercise concluded late that afternoon, Sarah felt exhausted but confident in her performance. She had successfully engaged every assigned target, adapted to all environmental challenges, and demonstrated the kind of comprehensive competence that the course was designed to evaluate. That evening, the candidates gathered for the final briefing where Master Sergeant Williams would announce the results and recommendations. The atmosphere was tense as everyone waited to learn whether their weeks of intensive training had earned them the opportunity to continue pursuing specialized marksmanship roles. Williams called each candidate forward, individually, to receive their evaluation and recommendations. When Sarah's name was called, she approached with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout the course. "Martinez," Williams began, reviewing a thick folder of documentation, "your performance throughout this course has been exceptional in every measurable category. Your shooting accuracy has been consistently outstanding. Your performance under stress has been exemplary, and your professional conduct has been beyond reproach." He paused, making eye contact with her before continuing. "More importantly, you have demonstrated the mental attributes and tactical judgment that we look for in precision marksmen. Your ability to adapt to changing conditions, make sound decisions under pressure, and maintain performance standards regardless of circumstances marks you as someone with genuine potential for advanced specialized training." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, though she maintained her composed exterior. "I am recommending you for immediate enrollment in the Special Operations Target Interdiction course," Williams continued. "Congratulations, Martinez. You have earned the opportunity to pursue training as a military sniper." The moment felt surreal to Sarah. From that first day of basic training when recruits had laughed at the idea of her handling military weapons, to this moment when she was being selected for the most demanding and prestigious marksmanship training the military offered, the journey seemed almost impossible to believe. As she returned to her seat, Sarah thought about all the people who had contributed to this moment. Her father, whose patient instruction had laid the foundation for everything that followed. Staff Sergeant Cooper, who had first recognized her potential and encouraged her to pursue advanced training. Master Sergeant Williams and all the instructors who had pushed her to develop capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. But mostly, she thought about that young woman who had stepped off the transport truck at basic training, determined to prove herself worthy of military service. That woman had been shaped by ranch life and family values, but she had needed to discover her own strength and potential through the challenges of military training. Now, as she prepared to begin the next phase of her journey toward becoming a military sniper, Sarah understood that she had found not just a military specialty, but a calling that would allow her to serve at the highest levels of professional competence. The girl who had learned to shoot tin cans in rural Texas was about to become one of the military's most precisely trained and lethal assets. The transformation was complete, but the real mission was just beginning.